so much you've said there, and I want to ask you about. I don't know if we'll have time here, but there's so much. But this whole thing of the life message, you know, God works in each of our lives.
Yep.
His work, He's the same. We come from different perspectives, different backgrounds, and He works into us. And there's normally something specific that He works in our lives that becomes our life message. And my guess is that there are people listening here that God's been doing something in their lives. And you know, we have, Henry, we have more of an international audience than normal. We have a lot of people from Singapore, China, Iran, who are English speakers who are listen to our broadcast. And the whole thing of the life message for them, you said something, and if you could maybe elaborate on a little bit, that there were people who said, Henry, that's your life message. You need to get this out. My guess is there are people who could probably be ministering in some areas, and but they haven't really identified what their life message is. Am I off base in talking like that?
I think everybody has a life message. It's just a matter of how obedient we've been to God who's giving it to us. And everyone has a unique relationship to God. When you look through the Scripture, there was no other burning bush. There was no other Abraham experience. No other Paul experience. They're unique encounters.
Right.
But that brings into the life of God's people a unique way of looking at, knowing, and experiencing God. So every believer has an encounter with God. They just need to think it through. Go back and look and see what is the magnitude of what God has done and what has He put in my life, like our history. Look at your life. See what your heritage is. If you're the first one, that's unique. But how does God want to bring that first member of a whole family into a unique relationship to Him, which is a life message for that person? So those listening, they need to understand they do have a life message. It's a matter of whether they recognize it and see it in the Scriptures, and whether they're delivering that life message.
But one of the things that you write about in experiencing God is the crisis of faith. That I don't know how many people around the world I've heard saying, this was my crisis of faith, using that terminology, you know, or this is my crisis, or they're in it, you know, and just speak a little bit about that briefly, because I think it'd be good for the people to hear. Define that terminology that you've used, and then tell us a little bit about it before we close.
I use the term crisis of belief because whenever God encounters you and reveals something about Himself, which initiates then His invitation for you to join Him, it'll create a crisis of belief. That is, whatever you do next will reveal what you believe about God. It's not just a crisis, it's a crisis of belief. What is it that God is now making known to you about Himself and how He wants to express Himself through your life uniquely where you are? And it may take you around the world. It may take you out of your business world, where God says, I have now trained you in the business world. I now want to rearrange you so that I can now work through you. It'll create a crisis of belief, because all the things that have kept you in a comfort zone, He's going to get you out of your comfort zone so that He can express Himself through you. The key is not what am I going to do for God, but what does God want to do through my life at this point? And that always focuses on what you believe about God. I recently have been through that with the military, and suddenly I've been thrust into the middle of affecting the military chaplains around the world. I've never done that in my life before. But it wasn't something He wanted me to do as much as something He wanted to do through me. Now, I could say, well, I don't have any experience in this. That's not my gift. That's a crazy thing to say. God doesn't work on our gifts. He works on His presence in a yielded life. But you will never yield your life to God unless you know Him. and then believe him, and then obey him. And obedience, of course, is the key to seeing God work mightily. But it usually, obedience preceded by a crisis of belief. He's going to take you beyond anything you've ever been and out of your comfort zone. But God will remain the same. And he's going to say, do you want to go with me to a new level of relationship with me? Whatever you do next will reveal what you believe about God.
And the scripture says the just shall live by faith. Mm-hmm. And so we're brought into these crises to bring us to the place of faith. And we live by faith. We walk by faith. We grow in faith. Everything.
And so many people think faith is what I believe. And I'd say, no, faith is what you do. Faith is based on God making himself known, you believing him, and then obeying him. Mm-hmm. Faith always includes obedience. Mm-hmm. And he said, why do you keep calling me Lord, but you never do anything I say? Mm-hmm. Well, Lord, I just believe in you. And he said, no, you really don't. Because faith operates on the basis of who I know you are and what you've said, and I will now obey you with all my heart.
You trust him enough that doing his will is going to be good. And it is good. It may not look good, it may not feel good always, but it's good because he's good.
And obeying his will is the only thing that's worthy of him.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because Jesus said, he who has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me, and he who loves me, I will love him and disclose myself to him. Yeah. And the knowledge of God, it's as the more you walk in faith, the more you obey, the more you know him, and it's a process of growing and becoming more like Christ. Henry, thank you so much. You have been such a blessing to us, and we appreciate you just taking the time to share these things. And let me just encourage you. You may have been listening to this broadcast, and the Lord's been speaking to your heart. He's initiated something in you. Yeah. You tuned into a web broadcast, and the Lord's spoken to you. Let me encourage you just to get away. Just find some time, just get you and God, and let him finish what he's begun to speak to your heart about, and let him go deep down into you. And we'll be praying for you, and God bless you, and thank you so much for listening.